is where we dive deep into the headlines that matter to you and all the biggest stories that we brought you over the week, courtesy our reporters. So I want you to imagine, being required to, to by law to show up and vote during elections or face the consequences. Just imagine that. That could soon be Nigeria's new reality if a proposed amendment to Electoral Act 2022 becomes law. The bill, sponsored by none other than the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Abbas Tajuddin, just passed second reading, and it's already sparking heated conversations across the country. Supporters say it's about boosting civic duty and curbing voter apathy. Opponents, they argue it threads too closely on constitutional freedoms. This morning, we break it all down. First, we will hear from our very own correspondent who's been following the story at the National Assembly. We're going to bring that, we're going to have two guests on the show. Dakbo.
All right, now joining us now is our correspondent, Idong Joseph, who brought that report. Who will be joining us to talk on it. We would also have a constitutional lawyer and a public affairs analyst, Evans Ufeli, to help us make sense of what this means from a legal standpoint. Of course, but just before we bring in our guest, looking at the implication of this,
right?
Do you think that this is a situation of putting the cart before the horse? This is where I'm going.
Right.
Some have said, if you want to curb voter apathy, why not look at the root cause? The root cause being, why are people not coming out to vote?
Good question.
I remember having a guest, on the political show, and he said, look, telling people to pay a fine of 100,000 or locking them up wouldn't really do much.
Right.
But why not address it from the root cause? And that's the issue of trust.
And that's what we'll be discussing now. We have Victor Tahamba. He's a programs manager at Ready to Lead Africa. He's going to be talking about answering that very important question that Dakpo raised. Victor, if you can help us to unmute your microphone on your device. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, Evans Ufeli, thank you so much for coming on. Evans, good morning to you as well. Good morning. Gentlemen, thank you all for coming. Let's just get started, shall we? And that was raised a very, very, very important question. And I think it's important that you two go ahead with it. Let's start with you, Evans. Is the Nigerian government putting the cart before the horse at this point? Evans, your take.
That bill is actually very unfortunate. It's unfortunate that you are throwing up such kind of bill when you have not really addressed the issue, the root cause of the issue. Voter apathy primarily stems from the fact that people have given up on the political process. That the political reform, the desired political reform that is required have not been addressed. Okay, and that is that our electoral system is unable, to deliver on merit. That the politicians want to win at all costs, and so they use all kinds of gimmicks, including the judicial system, to distort the political process, thereby rendering it ineffective. So that is actually the root cause, and that has to be addressed first before any other thing. Then two, the principle of democracy runs on the gamut of choice and freedom. Okay? So if you make any law that will hamper the people's freedom of choice to decide whether they want to be in the process or not, that law itself is repugnant to natural justice, equity, and conscience. Because there's no way in a democratic process where it is stated by any law whatsoever that you must force people to engage in the process. And where they refuse to engage in the process, you must penalize them by law. Okay, they forget that this bill is going to get to a stage we call public hearing. Okay, public hearing where they're going to invite these same people they are making this law against. Okay, they forget that. And when it gets to public hearing, it's mainly to break down law and order. Because they've not made any law whatsoever to alleviate poverty, to take people out of poverty. Rather, they have been the ones filtering the resources of the country, making life difficult for the citizens, and then they turn around to want to make a law to compel them to sustain the same political process that people have given up on.
All right.
So it is like beating a child and asking the child not to cry. They must do what they ought to do by law to first reassure the people of a true reform.
Right.
Okay, make laws to make lives easy for them before you can begin to talk about things like this. It is anti-democracy to force people into any kind of engagement. Civic responsibility is a social imperative, but it is not mandatory.
Yeah, which we're going to get into about. Yeah, we're going to get into that from a constitutional point of view, whether or not making voting mandatory is right, in terms of our constitution, whether it's infringing on the rights of the individual. But before I want you to answer that question, Victor, let me ask you. You are the programs manager for Ready to Lead Africa. Pretty much all about civic engagement and civic responsibility, and also leading, right? So I have to ask you, Victor, is INEC, I mean, like Dapo rightfully put in his opening statement there, that they're putting the cart before the horse, but most importantly, there are fundamental and foundational issues that have not been addressed yet by INEC and every other stakeholders when it comes to electoral process. True or false?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. And yes, so truly it's like putting the cart before the horse. And just like Ophelia just spoke, I think he has also led the very core issues of concern here. And for me, I always think that in a commonsensical society, or maybe by going by common sense, that bill was not even supposed to pass the first reading. And that is because the very fundamental issue. So for we that even work within the development sector, there is, usually when you want to tackle a particular problem, we have this concept we call the work on a problem tree analysis, where you let us observe exactly what are the root causes of issues. So the root causes basically is that let us look at rigging riggings of difficult elections. Let us look at the credibility of elections, whether we or this is per se. I think these are the main issues. And so when you even look at the trend, right, from 2015, elections, turnout, voter apathy has been dropping from 2019, 2023, it has dropped. And then we could also highlight a whole lot of issues. After the 2019 elections, NDI and the IRI did a joint report based on their observation and monitoring of the elections. And what was profound was that the 2019 election, the conduct of the 2019 election was a far cry from whatever was obtainable in 2015. So it was a decline in terms of success, in terms of efficiency, in terms of credibility of that election. So that is one. And we also have to look at electoral violence again as another huge cause, because we see situations whereby people just throw into the this voting area, cast away ballot box, and then there are security people there, they do nothing. People are lining up to vote, and then at a point in time, gunshots are going up here and there. So if we do not settle those issues, I do not essentially see how you want to criminalize people's rights to whether to vote or not to vote. So the idea is not to be dictatorial. It is to incentivize the process for people, the citizens again, to find this worthy, find this interesting, find it rewarding that they should come out and participate, do their civic responsibility. And so I think that for now, I will just basically stop there. Yeah.
All right. So if I got you correctly, Victor, you're saying that the idea is not necessarily to push people to a corner, in terms of exercising their civic duties, but to incentivize them to come out and vote. Maybe I should, did I get that correctly, please?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was saying.
Okay, so maybe I should direct my next question to
And then the only way you can incentivize people to vote.
Okay, Evans, maybe you'd like to react to that, but I would also like to add a bit to what Victor has said. Looking at the cost of conducting these elections, at the general level, for instance, in 2023, it cost about over 300 billion naira. That, of course, is about a 61% increase from the previous election of 2029, which cost over 100 billion naira. Now, you look at the cost of conducting these elections and the eventual outcome. By outcome, I'm not talking about results now. I'm talking about people coming out to exercise their civic duties. Is abysmally low. So, won't you, now this is me playing some sort of advocate here, not my standpoint though. Won't you also want to say that aside, incentivizing people, Nigerians sometimes only understand when they are the language of punitive measure. So, for instance, if there's a junction right now and there's no traffic light, you see people drive almost anywhere. But if they know that if I beat this traffic light, I would pay some sort of penalty. People sort of align. Do you think this could be what is at play here, Evans? And is there any form of justification?
No, this has to do with civic responsibilities. And the people's civic responsibility, you cannot criminalize it. Okay? Compliance can largely be harnessed through other means. You can actually harness. I know that the serious voter party, in the last election, only 26% of the population of those who even have voters card came out to vote, 26%, which is very, very low. So when you are electing a president with 8 million votes out of about the huge number that have registered or are registered voter, you know that so there's a problem somewhere, okay? But when you have a problem like this, then you think that criminalizing action is the only way out. You are getting it wrong, because that law will be violated. That law will be violated. You should have created incentive around the issue under reference. Create an incentive. Go out for political socialization and political education. Okay, let the people know, because these days, INEC is only concerned with conducting elections. But if you look at the law that set up INEC, the law that set up INEC gave INEC other responsibilities which they don't explore. Okay, and those responsibilities has to do with political education and socialization. Okay, sensitizing the people and letting them know the importance of their participation. Okay, then when you do that effectively, you can only drive a meaningful conversation along that line. And if there are any other means of making it, giving incentive, further incentive, any other way put together, they have to. It is the National Assembly's duty to think through the process. But for you to conclude that the only way you are going to have people to come out to vote is when you criminalize their action, that if they don't come, you are going to run, the lawsuit will be unimaginable.
Evans, it makes
you understand?
Yeah.
You cannot force a horse to the river.
And then force
you can
it
force
and
a horse
ask
to the river, but you
the
cannot force the horse to drink from that river.
Right, Evans, it makes me wonder whether or not our lawmakers or even the ruling elite they're creative or proactive in just creating laws, or thinking very proactive in their thinking. I'm looking for the right adjective, and I run a risk of saying otherwise, because if they understand the entirety of what the electoral body is supposed to be doing, which one of them is voter education. And that money, or the statistics that my co-host here just railed at, it begs to ask the question whether or not INEC itself has fulfilled all of its duties willfully, like rightfully and done. Have they scored? If you look at it from 2022 or 2019 or 2015, all the election cycle down now heading to 2027, 2 years ahead, have they fulfilled any of their duties? And I'm going to ask you, Victor, ready to lead Africa.
All right, thank you. So I think that INEC, they have this is department for public education, so which is basically supposed to be saddled with that responsibility of sensitizing the public, giving that kind of education, the political socialization that that was actually basically what I was spoken about earlier. But however, like maybe I think was not last month, I was having a conversation with one of the directors at NOA, which is the Nigerian Orientation Agency. And so that agency is also saddled with the responsibility of public education and excellence and all of those things. And I think from there, I understood that at least for almost every ministry, and in particular, our focus was not like on INEC. And then, so she said, for instance, there is a budget that INEC gets that's supposed to come to NOA for the dissemination of public education around all the kind of matters. But however, this ministry, department, agencies like the INEC do not engage with them because they don't want to release that particular funding, that budget that they have. So it now makes the process it now makes that responsibility not to be fulfilled inefficient. And I think that most times INEC also relies on the civil society because as people in the third sector, we're more concerned about public engagement. So usually every time we want that the right information is out, we are trying to get the public, the citizens generally to engage with the process. So so usually we're always trying to do all of this sensitization, education, because we are the civil society, we are these people that do this thing. So I think that also makes INEC relax on its own responsibilities of doing that same kind of engagement. Yeah, but more importantly, I also think that when we talk, so maybe to also say that I think that the idea behind the state is basically understood that people need to come outside. But then, just like I had mentioned earlier, you cannot criminalize rights, human rights. You cannot criticize anything that is right or it's a civic responsibility. And so it also means that when we're talking about the electoral reform, because the bill is in line with the whole conversation that currently we are having around that kind of electoral reform.
Victor, sorry to interrupt your line of thought.
And so when we're talking about electoral reform, I think we need to discuss it holistically so that most of the problems that you're trying to solve can be solved systematically and easily.
All right, Victor, sorry to come in here, but let's also look at, and I'm still going to direct the same question to Evans. Another key player in all of this is the political parties themselves. As a matter of fact, in this process, they are the biggest beneficiaries. And many of these challenges that are being mentioned, voter inducement, whether you call it vote buying or sharing of food items. Many of it
my favorite.
Thank you. Is when you do your tracing, it's done by many of these political parties. Violence too, to a very large extent. We've seen reports where some of these thugs or disruptors are linked to these political parties. So my question is this. Victor, don't you also think that the House should focus on the activity and the roles of these political parties to ensure compliance to the rule of the game? What do you think can be done? How do political parties become more responsible?
So that's actually a question that we will have to laugh because the House, the members of the House or the National Assembly, they are also politicians. What politicians do every time, most of the time, is to take advantage of the system. Wherever they find loopholes, they just want to take advantage of that system. And this is also, in fact, I even got to understand this when I was having a conversation with a former senator. And, I also mentioned the role of political parties, like how they play, because they are like a major stakeholder to the kind of elections that we have. I mean, to the credibility or the kind of elections that we have. But then he also told me that politicians in Nigeria, they will always have to look for loopholes and things like so. Having to do that, having the House or this member try to do that, it might be a part because it should be them gauging or guiding themselves on all of those things. But I also think that around this whole area, it should be around a whole lot of reforms, specific reforms. So at the Ready to Lead Africa, we are planning this kind of a youth summit on electoral integrity. And this is where we want to aggregate the voice of young people around the kind of elections that we want. And one of the issues that we have coming up discussing is that every time after every election, the loser always goes to court. And when the loser goes to court, the first respondent in this case usually is the party that won. And then so it's actually the candidate and then the party that won, and then later as third respondent we put INEC. So INEC do not have a responsibility to say that they are going to go and defend the elections that they themselves conduct. So we are thinking that if we remove the burden of proof from the political parties onto INEC, perhaps INEC on their own will now begin to do things the way that it has to be done, conduct the elections in a more favorable way, so that they don't say that we are the umpire, we are unjust, and then you conduct a 40 kind of elections, and then you just leave the responsibility for the other parties who are also victims of your conduct. So I think that is the only way. I think that that's just one of the ways, not like the only ways. And then secondly, it will have to be around also enforcement. I think also the issue of substantial compliance to the Electoral Act or to the conduct, or if it is substantially affected, I think that's this provision also in this act also has to be reviewed, so that anywhere elections have been, there are evidence that there is some malfeasance around this kind of elections, whether by INEC or maybe by the processes and everything, then those elections either in those particular areas, regardless of whether they will largely impact that should be conducted. That is a faulty election. So I think that those minor things that we might want to ignore, these are things that I think we should not begin to pay attention to.
All right, just quickly,
we make it major
Victor,
things, or whether we make them major things.
Victor, thank you so much. Quickly, I'd like Evan's take on this. 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think what we should do, where we should start from, is for us to go to court, sue INEC for failing in its responsibility. Sue INEC, join the National Assembly itself. This National Assembly, join them in that suit. Okay. INEC for failing to carry out voter education and socialization, and then INEC for failing, and then National Assembly for failing to carry out its oversight function by oversighting INEC for doing the right thing. It is the National Assembly, this National Assembly, that is the culprit here, because its function under Section 88 and 89 of the 1999 Constitution is to carry out oversight function on all persons and authority throughout the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So, having spotted the fact that there is no apathy, what has the National Assembly, has it exercised its oversight function against INEC, that is the principal body that's responsible for conducting election and sensitizing the public on the importance of the.
Seem to have lost Evan Sufele there.
Reprimanded. It's the same National Assembly that is pushing to make a law to criminalize the action. I mean, they should go and do what they ought to do.
Right. I mean, gentlemen, it's very interesting. I mean, because there are individuals that are the Nigerians whose faith forbids them from, engaging in any civic responsibility, especially when it comes to voting. There are some whose faith, forbids them from even blood transfusion. So this conversation it will be a long-running one. And as you rightfully put, Evans, in your opening submission there, that this is going to be contested when it goes to public vote. And it's just, it's only a matter of time. We're going to see this. I don't see this going through a third reading and being signed into law. I feel like this is just another one of those bills that would not survive, but only time will tell. Gentlemen, I must say thank you for taking out the time to join us. We appreciate you for coming on.
My pleasure.
Thank you.